dear friend and a member of the CSA Partnership Society, Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi of the Alma Research and Education Center. I'll turn it over quickly to Fred Seidman, our co-chairman of Council for Secure America, to say a few words. And then we are very, very delighted to hear from Sarit during these very tumultuous times. Invite everyone to please mute yourselves in the interim. We will be doing Q&A, which will be moderated. And we have no doubt this will be, as always, a very, very informative and educational opportunity. Fred.
Great. First of all, I want to welcome everyone. Obviously, I want to welcome our heroes, Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi. As I said to her before, we created a monster. She is now on television daily. She is on everything, everywhere, has become a media hero for those of us that are news junkies. And we can't appreciate enough, number one, that she's joined our advisory board and our partnership. She's been phenomenal to us and has been the major source of information on the Northern Front for everyone these days. Jennifer, I want to thank you as always for keeping the trains running on time. And every day that I look at the number of participants, Sarit, particularly for you, we're setting new personal highs every day, every time you're on. So I don't want to interrupt anything other than to express my phenomenal appreciation to Jennifer for, again, keeping all the CSA trains running on time. Jennifer, I'm going to let you speak afterward about the publication that we've now got out that I want to make sure everybody gets. And Sarit, I don't want to interrupt 1 second of your time. So.
And guys, please mute yourselves. I apologize. We are technologically incapable of accommodating this many people on mute. So we invite you to do the same. Sarit, we're honored to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And without further ado.
Thank you very much. Happy to see everybody here with us. For me, it's the fourth webinar that we are doing for audience of Alma. And the first one with just joining forces this way, and I hope to have many more with the CSA having kind of an interim or annual summary of the fightings until now, which we are going to focus today on the North. So there is a lot to talk about. There are a lot of questions on the table that I want to raise in this forum. A lot of evaluations, not only data, which I believe it's important. And I want to start, with the numbers. So actually, during the ceasefire, Hezbollah unilaterally declared a ceasefire. Okay, Jen, you can. Okay,
I'm working on muting on everyone. Please, yeah, everyone, please mute yourselves. I'm trying.
So during the ceasefire, Hezbollah joined unilaterally the ceasefire, and IDF also ceased its fire on the Lebanese border. So we kind of had a week, and I'm saying that as a resident of the Galilee, a week of artificial normality, I'll put it this way. And when this week ended, everything ended and went back to the reality as we experienced it during this war. Around 10 attacks of Hezbollah every day on the borderline with various munitions, whether it's UAVs, whether it's rockets, whether it's anti-tank.
Sorry, whoa.
Everything exactly the same.
Sorry.
So if I'm trying to summarize the situation until now, more than 60 days into this war in the North, we have 60,000 Israelis that were evacuated from their homes by the government. It's not people that left, like in Lebanon. We learned that a few tens of thousands left their homes in the towns which are right at the border. In Israel, this was initiated by the Israeli government. And the big question around it is when they are going to go back. It's important to understand that these communities were suffering from neglectance and were suffering, not all of them, but many of them were communities, how should I put it, the periphery of Israel, and to bring people back under the threat of Hezbollah is almost impossible. We had dozens of anti-tank missiles that were launched, dozens of rockets, about 10 UAVs, more than 100 mortars that were launched. Burkan was also used by Hezbollah, which is a very heavy missile of half a ton weight. It destroyed one of our bases here up north, while 2 Burkan were launched to this base. I can tell you that I live 9 kilometers from the border. I heard the explosion, and we usually hear explosions here at my home, but we hear that mainly the retaliation artillery of the IDF. These explosions were heard very loudly that morning of the Burkan. Almost 90 Hezbollah military operatives were killed, and a few more from other factions in Lebanon while trying to launch all of these munitions into Israel. They were killed by the IDF. Yesterday, we had a first incident that a Lebanese army soldier was accidentally killed, and IDF apologized for that. I'm inviting all of you to ask the question afterwards. I believe there is more than one. 9 Israelis were killed in the northern front. 3 of them were civilians that were killed from a very accurate fire, not accidentally, not statistic shooting, accurate anti-tanks that killed civilians that Hezbollah wanted them to get killed. As I've said, today the situation is that every day we have around 10 attacks coming from Lebanon to Israel, and probably many more that didn't succeed. The launching failed because IDF killed the squad of the launching before they succeeded, or destroyed the squad or the truck, or whatever it is. IDF is responding to the sources of the shooting. IDF is attacking, sometimes in the nights, against Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in South Lebanon, but these attacks are very, very limited, and they are mainly against Radwan brigades, which are the commando force of Hezbollah, the parallel to Nukhba in Hamas, which received the mission to invade into Israel. And as we discussed in the past, the same mission that was actually executed by Hamas in the south. What I'm actually saying, and most of Hezbollah casualties until now are not coming from Radwan brigades. They are coming more from the anti-tank squads and from the geographical units of Hezbollah. These units were established to be capable of launching all these rockets and munitions from Lebanon and fighting IDF in Lebanon, but not necessarily invading into Israel. So if we are trying to compare Hezbollah to a regular army, there are brigades that their mission is to launch rockets to Israel. There are brigades that their mission is to launch anti-tanks. There are brigades that their mission is to fight against IDF soldiers if IDF invade into Lebanon. And there are brigades which their mission is to invade into the Israeli communities and execute a similar plan of Hamas, including taking civilians as hostages. This is all inside Hezbollah plan, or if you like, Hamas plan that was written by Hezbollah and maybe even by the Iranians. Many people ask themselves at this time of the war, so what's the strategy? Like, okay, it's not a full-scale war. It's a kind of war of attrition here up north, especially from the Lebanese border. If you, melt into this what is happening in the Red Sea, if you add into this what is happening against Americans in Syria and Iraq, what's that exactly? What's the interest? What's the interest? Hi, Charles, can you mute yourself, please? Okay, what's the interest of Hezbollah in not getting into full-scale war, but actually getting into war? And the answer lies in the interest of Hezbollah. If you understand the interest of Hezbollah, you understand the strategy of Hezbollah. And the interest of Hezbollah, surprisingly enough, is not to fight for the Palestinian cause. It's not defending the Palestinian cause. On the contrary, the interest of Hezbollah is to build its image as the protector of Lebanon and to take over Lebanon. That's the main interest of Hezbollah in all of that. Of course, in addition to the basic interest of fighting Israel and the campaign against Israel. So Hezbollah is not willing to go to this kind of campaign under the Palestinian cause or as the protector of Lebanon. Hezbollah is definitely willing to drag Lebanon into war because it believes that it will enable it to take over Lebanon, but it is not interested to do so while being connected to Hamas. And that's why we believe here in Alma Center, and we said that time and time again, even before this war, that Hezbollah was prepared, fully prepared to war. The photos that all of you see behind me are the photos of Hezbollah military operatives next to the border that I myself took. They were preparing for invasion. They built military positions. They did everything that Hamas had done in preparedness for invasion. And you see the patrol over here, the patrol of a few officers probably. You see the military positions, the spine on IDF forces. And after this war started, we have seen the destroying of cameras and antennas with very accurate missiles that were launched, Cornet, which are anti-tank accurate missiles that were launched against these surveillance, Israeli surveillance on the border. This is all preparedness for an invasion. In the United Nations, UNIFIL interim report that described the situation in South Lebanon between February to June 2023, they reported on 600 border crossing from Lebanon to Israel. I'm not talking about immigration. Don't imagine that. I know. I'm talking about touching the fence and going back, crossing and going back. I'm talking of something which is really, really short. And the aim of that is to test the IDF response, to test the surveillance capabilities, to test where are the best places to infiltrate or to invade into Israel. So all the preparations were made and are still being made to create a situation of an invasion of these Radwan brigades into the state of Israel. And Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, created here a situation which is clear that it is unbearable. It's for him, it's kind of a win-win. Because he's saying, okay, if I'm not going to deteriorate into war, and I don't want to initiate it myself, so I created a new reality on this, in the state of Israel, and I made Israel abandon the Upper Galilee. And again, I don't know if you've seen in my eyes, but when I'm saying that, I feel it in my stomach. Like, imagine that Houston and more will be completely evacuated because of terror. This is unheard of. These are the numbers, the similar numbers, more than the city of Houston. What was actually created here, if I'm looking backwards to history, is a kind of a security belt inside the state of Israel. This is extremely problematic, that Israelis cannot live everywhere in Israel because it's not safe. And when Israelis went back to their communities to take clothing, Hezbollah launched anti-tank missiles and people were hurt and homes were destroyed. So, and the area is abandoned. Like, we tried to travel last week during the ceasefire in these areas.
It was good.
Can't do that.
Yeah. I get a little problem with my knee, but I'm
Can't do
okay.
that. If I'm trying to summarize what I've just said and to give I don't know, some kind of explanation to how come Hezbollah didn't join in, and maybe even further question which was asked since this war started, what's the level of the Iranian involvement in this, and clearly the Hezbollah involvement in this. So I know I'm kind of a single voice in that, but this voice should be heard as well, because I know that the Israeli Prime Minister, and I know that the American president, and many researchers also in Israel, are saying that Iran didn't know. What Iran didn't know? Iran didn't know the capabilities. It gave these capabilities. It trained Hezbollah and Hamas. It armed Hezbollah and Hamas. As I've said, the plan was written, at least in Beirut, maybe in Tehran, and it's the same plan. It doesn't make sense that Iran didn't know. There were a series of meetings between the Iranian foreign minister and Nasrallah, and at the same time, a series of meetings between Nasrallah and Islamic Jihad and Hamas. And Nasrallah is kind of a key player that connects everybody And at the same time, you see that in this war, the Houthis participate, the militias in Iraq and Syria participate. So I don't buy it that Hezbollah or Iran didn't know. We can argue whether they knew about October 7th or not. I think they knew, because this is not just a sporadic date on the Jewish calendar. This is a holiday. Many soldiers were in vacation, and it was a date that was picked specifically to serve the success of the operation in Gaza. I can define what Hamas had done in the eyes of Hezbollah, testing the water, sacrificing Gaza to see the response, not only the response of the Israelis, the response of the Americans, the response of the Arabs, the response of the militias, how everybody is mobilized around this campaign, and then to have conclusions and lessons and move forward to the next phase, which we don't know the timeline of that, and we don't know exactly what does that mean. All in all, Iran has a vision, which is the unification of fronts. That's the term they use. I would use a different term to make everybody understand. Multi-front campaign against the state of Israel. That's why you see militias in Syria and Iraq attacking American forces. That's why you see the Houthis attacking Israelis and attacking ships and attacking American forces. And that's why you see Hezbollah attacking from the north as well. Sometimes rockets were launched a few times from Syria as well. And I think that in West Bank, it hardly gets to the news. But in West Bank, what you see is a campaign, a military campaign of the IDF there, with a huge amount of arrests against Hamas terrorists over there that kept it down, the flames down as much as possible. Now we should talk a few words about scenario under completely new basic assessments and basic assumptions, because even myself, all of us Israelis, we were kind of captured in the conception and in the strategy, the Israeli security strategy, which was based on alert and deterrence, meaning that we believed that to initiate a war, for example, in Lebanon, but it goes the same way with Gaza, a war to eliminate Hezbollah or a war to eliminate Hamas, we are not going to get the support of international community. It's going to cost the lives of many on both sides. And that's why we will manage the conflict instead of eliminating the threat. How do you manage the conflict? You create effective deterrence, and you rely on intelligence that will give you an alert if something happens, if something is planned, and that way you can prevent 1973, if you like. And at the same time, you build on defense, like the wall and the physical barrier that was created in Gaza. The biggest lesson that Israel has learned, and we should have learned that from 73 as well, is that this security strategy cannot last forever. At some point, intelligence fails. At some point, deterrence doesn't work, and it doesn't work specifically in this case because we are dealing with players that don't care about human life. So deterrence is different. When we speak of Israelis, Americans, Hamas, Hezbollah, what is exactly deterrence when we speak of these kind of players? Like, if Hezbollah will send Radwan brigades tomorrow to the north, the military campaign will fail or succeed? Probably fail in our eyes, because IDF is here. It's not the same situation as October 7th. We are prepared. They lost the surprise effect. But in their point of view, even if they will have 2,000 combatants killed, but at the same time, they will have Israelis killed. Doesn't matter if they are civilians or not. At the same time, the battlefield will be inside Israel in empty communities that nobody knows when they will be able to go back to their homes. For them, it's a victory. Not the same as Hamas, but enough. And that's why deterrence is something very, sneaky. Something that it's not easy to understand. We can no longer manage conflicts. It's a statement that it's very difficult for me to say because I truly believed in this. But now we can no longer sleep with these monsters. We truly need to find a way to eliminate them. And up north, the question is huge because each scenario or solution, I know Americans like the term solutions. So each scenario or solution that we are looking at has a tag price. Diplomatic solution. What is the diplomatic solution that is now being negotiated? Going back to 1701. Why do we need to go back to something that never worked? I explain. 1701 is the resolution that ended the previous war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. The idea was to push Hezbollah from above to above the Litani River. This is 20 kilometers from the border. Hezbollah will not be present on the border. The big question is, if this is what 1701 should have done, who should enforce 1701? Israel says it's the United Nations. That's why they position 10,000 soldiers over there. And the rest of the world is saying, no. It's the Lebanese army. And United Nations should only be there, give assistance to this project. Bottom line, it was never enforced. You can see the positions behind me. These positions were destroyed by the IDF since this war has started. But United Nations, Lebanese army, Lebanese government, they enabled Hezbollah to militarily deploy in South Lebanon in a way that threatens Israelis' lives. So if this mechanism didn't work for 17 years, why should it work now? Because somebody said so. While Hezbollah is much stronger, while Hezbollah is a member of the Lebanese government, while Lebanon is in an economic crisis, in a political crisis, there is no president in Lebanon, there is no head chief of staff in Lebanon, the prime minister is an interim government, Hezbollah can block any political decision and can pass any political decision, almost any political decision. There is no political decision in Lebanon that can pass without the concession of Hezbollah. How can we pass 1701, go back to 1701? And worse than that, Hezbollah, who identifies these talks now around this resolution, already published by its proxy speakers, not official speakers, in the Lebanese media saying, okay, before we will implement 1701, Israel should also implement 1701, what actually Hezbollah means, stop flying. We don't have cameras, or if we do, they were damaged. So we do have UAVs, we do have flying in Lebanon to understand what Hezbollah is doing. We have been doing that. That's a violation, I agree, but we have been doing that because we had to see what's the military preparedness of Hezbollah. So stop flying and evacuate the northern part of a town named Rajar, that its citizens are not Jewish, but they are Israeli citizens. And due to the UN, the border goes in the middle of this town. So we are demanded, in against to any humanitarian right and principle, to divide a town in the middle and abandon Israeli civilians, to make 1701 be implemented by Hezbollah, who is anyway going to bypass it this way or not. What about a military solution? Let's talk military solution. Full-scale war. Full-scale war is a problem. We know that as an Israeli. If we get to full-scale war like what we are doing in Gaza, we have two problems around that. First, internal. The barrages of rockets are going to be 10 times more. Hezbollah has 10 times more rockets than Hamas. More rockets to Tel Aviv. 1 minute. More accurate missiles. The damage in Israel will be huge. And the second problem, the damage in Lebanon will be huge because all these rockets are hidden, like in Gaza. And you've seen, I hope you have seen all the footage that is coming out of the IDF that is filming these rockets inside the bedrooms of the children of Gaza. This is the same in Lebanon. In the mosques, in the schools, in the public buildings, in the hospitals, this is the same in Lebanon, not only in South Lebanon. what kind of international legitimacy are we going to have? Well, Lebanon is precious, if I'm using this term from the movies. It's the precious for the international community. Other solutions, creating a kill zone, okay? Not all of, just a kill zone. You see, again, these areas behind me, if we see Hezbollah there, we should just kill them. Is this going to stop an invasion of thousands of Hezbollah? I don't know. How are we going to bring back the people to live in the communities up north while IDF is constantly 24/7 working on this kill zone? And Hezbollah is there as well. I don't know. The terrain is not flat. Creating a kill zone when you have areas that you can hardly see from Israel because they can hide there. It's all hills and valleys and trees. And it's challenging. It's different than in Gaza. And as we all know, because it was the same with the Gazian border, it doesn't last forever. Eventually, there is kind of, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, erosion of even of this kill zone. Security belt. Everybody remembers security belt. We've been to inside Lebanon 18 years. We had the security belt. And in Israeli collective memory, this is a trauma. We don't want to be inside Lebanon. We don't want our soldiers to get killed inside Lebanon. So I'm not saying there is no solution. I think eventually something will happen. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure my leadership knows what it is, and I'm not even sure that Hezbollah knows what it is. All I'm saying that each of these suggestions comes with a tag price. And we are already in a very problematic situation here. Just, saying a closing sentence before going to Q&A. When I used to take the groups to the border, to the areas that I cannot go anymore, I very recently received the question of, so why do you live here? How come people live here if it's that dangerous? And I'm saying, if you measure the state of Israel from Metula to Eilat, from the northern community to the southern community, you get a road of less than 500 kilometers. Israelis should be capable of living everywhere in Israel in security, every inch in security. And the Upper Galilee, which is now abandoned, and there is no mall open there, there is no school, there are no people there, these communities are empty. This Upper Galilee is part of the state of Israel. It is not in a disputed area. It is not in an occupied area. It has nothing to do with Palestine, Israeli conflict, two-state solution. All of that is irrelevant to the area where I live in. And we might have, the whole world should understand that if we give up on this, we are giving up on the very basic notion of the existence of the state of Israel. And that's why Israelis that are now drafted and that are now fighting, all of us, there is a consensus here in Israel, and you know that consensus here is very rare. But there is a consensus now here in Israel between left and right and religious and seculars and people that are living in West Bank and North and South and Tel Aviv for the legal reform, against the legal reform, for Netanyahu, against Netanyahu. All of us agree that we are fighting for our lives and we are fighting for our homes in the North and in the South, and that we cannot let terror organizations survive. That's it. This should end. All of us agree on that. We just need to figure it out, how to do it here in the North. So I'll stop here and we can open it for questions, Fred.
Wonderful. So we'll turn to co-chair Fred Zeidman from Council for Secure America. And given the magnitude of people on this Zoom, which is wonderful, if you guys can send your questions in the chat, we'll read them accordingly. Fred.
Great. Thank you. Sarit, you're just phenomenal. And I think if you take a look at the number of participants we have today, we have broken every Sarit record, and we've certainly broken every CSA record. You're just marvelous, and we love you for it. Let me ask you this. CSA is our mandate includes a relationship with Israel and the energy industry. Can you tell us two things? The link between the Iranian oil industry and the funding of this particular war, and also Qatar's role in this. Qatar's not getting mentioned at all, and perhaps it's because they're trying to kosher themselves with being involved in the negotiations with a hostage release. But that being said, can you also speak to Qatar's role in the financing of this war by our enemies on every front?
Okay, I want to divide my answer to three parts, actually. The first one is about the financing, and I will put it this way. The West enforced, no, but maybe I should put it this way. My doctor, I have Crohn's disease. My doctor always tell me that there is no medicine that is efficient unless you take it.
Okay.
So if you impose sanctions, but these sanctions cannot be enforced, or even you yourself are not exactly enforcing the sanctions, so they will never be effective. And what was created here is that a kind of an alternative economy that Iran, even if the sanctions are imposed by the West, which I'm not sure this is the case, but let's say it for a moment, assume that for a moment, Iran doesn't need the Americans to market. It can be very helpful, but they can survive, maybe not prosper, but they can survive without it. And how do they survive? They became economic partners of Russia, especially with the drones. They are marketing with China. They are marketing inside the Arab world. They are marketing with Turkey. And there is kind of an alternative economy that was created in the world that all these guys that United States sanctioned are actually marketing between themselves. And I can add to this list North Korea and Venezuela. And maybe I forgot another player, I'm not sure. So this is about, funding terror with the oil. Of course, Iran, 70% of the budget of Hezbollah comes from Iran. 100% of the budget of Islamic Jihad comes from Iran. I don't know what the percentage of the Hamas budget, but it's around $100 million a year that Iran provides to Hamas. Hamas manufactured the rockets mostly by itself, mostly, not all of it, not the advanced ones. But Hezbollah, this is smuggling of munition that is manufactured either in Syria or in Iran. All these smuggling cost money. The secure of the corridor of smuggling cost money. The money comes from Iran. Iran, along with Syrian players, developed the drug industry as well in Syria. Oil is part of the income for Iran, no doubt. And this money goes eventually to the IRGC. And the best proof is look at the Iranian people. There is no prosperity and prospering economy in Iran. And even if you will release the $6 billion that were now refrozen, as far as I understood from the news, maybe I'm wrong, in Qatar. So they would never meant to go for the benefit of the Iranian people. And I'll tell you more about this issue because this was an agreement that was made right before the war. And the Secretary Blinken was asked around that. And he was asked, do you have a mechanism that will make sure that it will not go to terror? And he said, yes. And he was asked, what kind of mechanism? And he said, we have a mechanism with the Qataris. So here is the news. The Iranians on their side, when they were asked the same question, they said, we will do with the money whatever we choose. We will decide what to do with this money. And that's the gap. What is being said in Persian and what is being said in English, it's not the same thing. And it was the same, by the way, with the nuclear deal. Qatar. Qatar is becoming more and more the problem rather than the solution. listening to the heads of the universities yesterday, and for me it was this morning, that are being financed by Qatar, saying that calling for genocide against Jews is okay. Wow, like, okay, we need to stop and rethink all of that. Throughout the years, Qatar played a double game, and Qatar presented itself as impartial player in the scene, but actually it's not an impartial player because it does support Hamas. It has economic connections with Iran and relationship with Iran. And being an impartial player when you have monsters around you, it's actually not being an impartial player. It's taking sides. And we've seen this also with regard to the negotiation about the abducted hostages in Gaza. We understood that Qatar is not an impartial moderator, but this is what we have, and we are playing with what we have because we want to bring the hostages back. But it was completely an unfair game. Al Jazeera, which is a TV station that is operated by Qatar, is denying October 7 atrocities. I can send you, Jen, a video later on, you can see it, denying, saying these are Netanyahu's lies, what happened in October 7. This is unheard of. And nobody complains about Al Jazeera. So I think that it's time to rethink the policy around Qatar and to have some demands from her, because definitely the Qataris are earning a lot of prestige from the fact that the biggest American base in the Middle East is in Qatar. And maybe not only prestige. So there is a leverage here that should be of influence, that should be used. You manage the oil issue, and I want to add one more chapter to this discussion of the oil issue, which is the Houthis in Yemen. Also here, something happened. Shipment companies cannot pass through Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea, through the straits. Israel, in 67, we went to war for that. The Arabs threatened to eliminate the state of Israel, and Nasser blocked the straits. We cannot enable that, but this time we should have partners around that, because the fact that the Red Sea will be closed to Western shipments and ships, and I don't know what, it's not just Israeli, it's British, it's others, it's not just Israelis. All these, the crew that was kidnapped by the Houthis, I don't know if you've seen the video of the kidnapping. It's an unbelievable video when you talk about their capabilities of taking over a ship. None of them was Israeli. There was not a single Israeli on this boat. In the second boat, there was not a single merchandise on this boat of Israeli merchandise. Nothing was meant to get to Israel. I think that the third boat was British. What does that mean for Egypt with the Suez Canal? If companies are now not going through the Red Sea, they are not going through the Suez Canal. That's a loss of income for Egypt. So we have a joint interest here. Americans, Israelis, Egyptians, Saudis, that this area will be safe. And Iran, what Iran had done is to create these proxies and let them go, becoming kind of independent, and then say, it's not me, it's the Houthis, it's not me, it's Hezbollah, it's not me, it's Hamas. No, it is definitely Iran that is involved with the money, with the funding, with the ideology, with the munition, with the training, and we shouldn't listen to these denials. And we should, again, unite here against this threat, that it's the direct threat comes from the Houthis, but the indirect threat comes from Iran. They build this capability. And it is clear to MBS that that's the case, of course.
So, Sarit, to shift for a second right now into 1701 Lebanon, and then we're going to tackle a couple of other parts of the world vis-a-vis these questions. Would you say that the sentiment in Lebanon right now, and we've heard I've personally heard from people who are currently living in Lebanon that there is a lot of distrust of what is going on right now vis-a-vis these Hamas attacks. They don't believe it to be true. And we're talking about Christian Lebanese, not Muslim Lebanese, which is very interesting. Would you say right now that, but that being said, people are very hesitant to support Hezbollah. They have no real choice, but they're also very leery about Nasrallah waging a war that's going to destroy Lebanon. What is your take right now on what is going on in Lebanon internally from the population standpoint, and how realistic is it that Nasrallah is about to enter a war that will destroy Lebanon and destroy a lot of the infrastructure there? They've gone through this in 06. Are they ready for, do they have appetite for more? Sarit, I think you're muted.
The question is, who is they? So we need to break that to different participants in the Lebanese arena. Let's start from the Christians that you mentioned. The fact that the Christians don't want war, the fact that the Christians are against Hezbollah doesn't necessarily mean that the Christians don't support what happened in October 7th or support what happened in October 7th. It's a separate discussion. It is difficult for me to blame them when I see Al Jazeera, when I see the algorithm in social media, when I see what they are exposed to. There are actually two completely different parallel narratives in the media. One that describes what happened and the other one that denies what happened. And they don't meet, and it's different audiences. And that's why in the Arab world, it's really difficult to get into the Arab world and say, no, this actually happened. Israelis are not lying, this actually happened. So this is with denying October 7th, and I think that if Lebanese if there are Lebanese here online, if there are Lebanese that are living outside of Lebanon that are listening to us, and this audience can reach out to them, for the sake of Lebanon, not for the sake of Israel, for the sake of Lebanon, they should know the truth. And the truth should be exposed to the Lebanese in Lebanon by the Lebanese in the diaspora, because they are the only one who can be exposed to the other narrative as well. Lebanon is divided. There are the opponents to Hezbollah and there are the supporters of Hezbollah, and this is not something that started in October 7th. And the opponents of Hezbollah are not interested in war. The supporters of Hezbollah are just repeating the messages of Hezbollah itself. So even if the population in South Lebanon that knows that the homes will be destroyed is in deep down in their hearts don't want war because we are all human beings, okay? Eventually, Hezbollah is entrenched in these villages, and this population is completely dependent in the services that Hezbollah provides them. And the Hezbollah is an inherent part of these populations. So we don't see resistance. The only thing we saw was, as I've said, voluntarily evacuation, but we don't see resistance. And I'm saying that very sadly because I'm looking for this resistance all the time. And I don't see growing resistance to Hezbollah from its Shiite base in Lebanon. I see there was resistance before, also some Shiite resistance, and there is resistance now, but it is almost meaningless when you talk about the power of this resistance to disarm Hezbollah. Maybe Hezbollah takes in consideration, and I'm saying maybe because I'm not even sure, the question of, look what Israel had done in Gaza, I don't want the same fate for Lebanon. But look what happened in 2006. He's also looking at that as well. And we telling ourselves a story that Hezbollah regrets the kidnapping in 2006 and regrets the war in 2006 and that there was a lot of damage in Lebanon. But if we are looking 17 years backwards and not 7 months backwards, we understand that Hezbollah became much stronger since 2006. We understand that Lebanon became much weaker than 2006. We understand that the military capabilities of Hezbollah became much stronger than 2006. So Lebanon being ruined, is that a great such a great risk for Hezbollah after he saw what happened in 2006, I want to doubt this statement. And I am still waiting to hear from people who were identified with Hezbollah flipping and saying, no, we don't want that. And this doesn't happen. And if it happens extremely rarely. And these guys are being expelled from Lebanon or dead or intimidated. And the next day you see them apologizing in the media. So there is the public opinion in Lebanon is not Lebanese public opinion. It's Christian, it's Shiites, it's Druze, it's Sunni, and it's very tricky to understand it. And that's why it's dangerous to count on it.
Absolutely. Vis-a-vis Israel's, God willing, increasing success in Gaza, is there a probability that, is this going to increase or decrease Hezbollah's action on the northern front? Are we anticipating success for the Israelis in Gaza yields, you know, the Lebanese / Hezbollah, that whole axis from invading in the north? What's your take on that? Is it likely? Is there a correlation?
It's a tough question, I must tell you, because there are two opposite trends here. Some experts are saying that the more Hamas is damaged, the more Israel is having achievements in Gaza, the more involved Hezbollah will get. And we've seen this gradual escalation on the Israeli-Lebanese border since the war started. Yet, in the past 2 weeks, it's kind of stabilized on a certain level that I described. And yet Israel is accelerating its attacks in Gaza. Having said that, I would put it in the opposite way. As an Israeli, I can't see a scenario that Hamas will survive this and Hezbollah will not be encouraged from the fact that Hamas survived this. It's a really bad message for Hezbollah if Hamas will survive this. It's a huge problem because Hezbollah will say, if Hamas survived this, so I'm not going to let the 60,000 Israelis going back to their homes. But anyway, I will continue the launching of anti-tank missiles. No, nothing is going to happen to me. This would be the basic assumption. So it's kind of two opposite trends that from each of them we can conclude that there will be kind of escalation. And I don't know which trend will eventually happen and what trend will bring to de-escalation. That's what I've said. I don't know, after the situation that was already created here and kind of a status quo that was already created here, I don't see how we are going backwards, bringing Israelis back to their homes, even if Hezbollah will cease fire, which is not an imaginable scenario. It can happen that we'll go for 1701, Hezbollah will cease its fire, and then what, Israelis will go back to their homes and will continue to live under the threat of Hezbollah, that when it will decide, it will invade to Israel while the reservists were already released and the US carriers already back home. And what will prevent the next massacre? That's the biggest question that is being asked here since October 7th, again and again and again. The problem is not now. The problem is when the reservists will go back to their homes.
Understood. Looking right now,
and everything will get back to normal, but it will never get back to normal.
Understood. While we were actually on this Zoom, the Defense Minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, made a very bold and important statement that it's time to enforce Resolution 1701. And he said, if this does not succeed, Israel will, quote, act with all the means at its disposal to push Hezbollah back through military actions. What's the probability of that, of the UN actually enforcing that? We've seen that UNIFIL has proven not to do very much over the past number of years. How likely is it that Israel will take a preemptive measure on a military front to enforce 1701? Can
the dead go back to life? 1701 is dead. It died long before October 7th. And if we want to have an international mechanism, it shouldn't be 1701. It should be a different mechanism. It should be different, and it should be limited. It should have a deadline. 1701 doesn't have a deadline. We've been waiting for 17 years that Hezbollah will be disarmed in South Lebanon. It didn't happen. We should have a deadline. We owe this to the people who are living here next to the border to have a deadline to say, okay, this is the diplomatic solution that we could figure out, whatever it is. And if within 2 months or 3 months, we're not going to see the rockets going out of the homes, we will take care of that.
And
this doesn't exist in 1701.
And do you believe that the American presence right now, that the naval ships that were deployed there, is that what the deterrence is right now for Hezbollah? Is that why they're holding back?
No, I don't think so. I think the reason they are holding back is an internal reason, as I've said, because they don't want to be identified with Hamas, and they don't want, I think there is, they don't want to drag Lebanon to war for the Palestinian cause. They were prepared in the past year to drag Lebanon to war for a Lebanese cause, but not for a Palestinian cause. The importance of the US carriers here is greater than that, because if the very existence of the State of Israel will be threatened by the accurate missiles of Hezbollah, there is an operational capability to deal with that. That's why it is so important. There is an operational capability to deal with a direct Iranian involvement, if there will be such an Iranian involvement. So the meaning of the American military presence here is not psychological, it's operational. It's the fact that it can actually be active. That's why it's so important. Maybe psychological for Israelis. For us, it was very encouraging, and we are grateful for that.
Unequivocally, and we know that the U.S.-Israel relationship is truly unshakable and unbreakable. Vis-a-vis Turkey's role in all this, there's been little mention of Turkey. Turkey has not, has been sort of also, like Qatar, playing two sides of the coin. What role, if any, does Turkey have in funding Hezbollah, holding Hamas leaders, in a safe haven? Can you speak a little bit more briefly to Turkey before we wrap up?
Of course, it's my hobby. Turkey.
We love you, Sarit.
Yeah. I was there when Erdogan became president of Turkey. We were captured in conception. Nobody believed that Erdogan will change the face of Turkey, except for one young officer that says that he is going to Islamicate Turkey. And this is what he did. He Islamicated Turkey. He changed Turkey. Erdogan is rooted in the Muslim Brotherhood DNA. He sat in jail for supporting, sat in the Turkish jail for supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan supports Hamas. Erdogan is hosting Salah al-Aruri, who lives in Turkey and in Lebanon. When Erdogan decided that it wants to improve the relationship with Israel for his own reasons, so he asked Salah al-Aruri to go, but immediately when this campaign started, Erdogan made it very clear where he stands in this campaign, because this is where his heart lies, rather than the interests of Turkey. No, I can't say that Turkey supported Hezbollah. I am not familiar with that. Maybe there are cells, maybe there is an activity. We never researched that, so I don't know. But definitely there are close connections between Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas with Turkey. And in the past, Israel discussed this with Turkey many times. We can remind everybody the Marmara flotilla, that as if it was a humanitarian aid to Gaza, and it was actually a PR campaign that on board they were terrorists and members of terrorist organizations. This is who Erdogan is. It's part of who he is. He is willing to fight for the Muslim Brotherhood. He's willing to die for the Muslim Brotherhood cause. We should understand that.
Absolutely. And then before our final question, I'll let Fred wrap up. Can you speak, obviously, we talked 2 years ago on a Zoom about the maritime oil deal between Lebanon and Israel. Has there been any effect that's manifested from this war on those oil fields and sort of the gas findings, and how has that yielded anything? Or is everything calm in that direction?
No, here I have a question which I couldn't solve. I didn't have the answer. Here is the quiz. We signed the agreement. Due to the agreement, Lebanon can search for gas. Israel can produce the gas. We are producing the gas. This gas is extremely important. It has, I don't know, a high percentage of share in our gas production here in Israel from the gas field that is close to the border with Lebanon. It was extremely important for us, and we are paying the price because, as I've said, Hezbollah was prepared for war, and Hezbollah and Lebanon received what it wanted. But we are producing the gas. Is Lebanon producing the gas? Nobody knows whether there is gas in Lebanon. And then the French company that received the rights to search for the gas, Total, sent a gas rig to Lebanon to search for the gas, and it arrived in August. And it said that by October, we will know whether there is gas in Lebanon or not. In October, Total didn't make any official announcement, as far as I know. You are from the oil industry. Maybe you know better. I would love to hear if I'm wrong. But we didn't find an official announcement. But there were publications in Lebanon that no gas was found. And then, not at the same time, maybe 2-3 weeks later, Hochstein, who is the American representative for energy and who is the engineer of this deal that you mentioned, made a statement to say, Total will try again. Research again. So here is my question. Is there gas in Lebanon or not? Why is this such an important question? Because maybe this is what Hezbollah is waiting for. Maybe this is also a good reason, just to wait and see what will happen with that. To give Total the chances. It is clear that if there will be war, all this gas searching will be stopped, and the gas will leave the area or will stop activity. We all know that. Hezbollah already built its case that if there is no gas in Lebanon, it's probably because Israel stole the gas. You talked at the beginning of this Q&A session about the impression Lebanese get about what happened in October 7 and about the fake news that is going on in the media. This campaign started long ago, that if gas will not be found in Lebanon, Israel to be blamed. Oh, that's a good reason for war. Here is another excuse. So maybe it's also related to that. I am like, it's an open question because I truly don't understand where these searches have gone and why don't we hear anything from Total.
Well, as always, Sarit, I feel like we need to schedule part 2 because we have a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And I'm going to turn to CSA co-chairman Fred Zeidman to wrap up. But as always, your friendship, your expertise, and your partnership do not go unnoticed to all of us at CSA. And we're excited to welcome new folks from the Alma community today on the Zoom and look forward to many more opportunities to come. So with that, Fred.
Jennifer, before I take over, can you speak about this remarkable document that we produced last week and are starting to distribute this week? If you don't mind saying just a word about it before I get into my effusive thanks to Sarit. So
absolutely,
that deserves to go last. So
of course. And by the way, guys, we also have a Zoom tomorrow with former co-chair of the Knesset Abraham Accords Caucus and CSA Advisory Board member Ruth Wasserman Landy, and a number of other programs coming up that we will share by email.
You know what? I'm sorry, but mention the one we have coming next week.
Okay.
It's from a historical perspective.
In 2 weeks.
Once again, we've got just an incredible program coming up. So
perfect. I'm on it. All right. So CSA released the first ever kind of comprehensive report discussing the geopolitics that led to October 7th, what happened on October 7th, and a phase-by-phase analysis of Israel's military response with over 80 news outlets, government sources, and expert sources cited in the report. we're going to be hosting a Zoom. I will send it around to everyone to disseminate to their networks, but we will be hosting a Zoom with CSA Research Fellow, who's an Emmy Award-winning IDF reservist who helped put this together. So that will be happening next Tuesday. And we have other Zooms coming up, including former Director General of the Prime Minister's Office, Ellie Groner, of course, Natan Sharansky, who Fred was alluding to on the 18th, and a number of others. I'm sure we'll have another one with Sarit before Christmas as well. But this document really is a comprehensive and easy to read overview of how we got here. And we're excited to share it with all of our partners and friends and hope to disseminate it to your respective networks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jennifer, thank you for the marvelous job you're doing. Sarit, you have said, Sarit, you're the Michael Jordan of of the Israel relationship. You are so marvelous. We are so appreciative. Thank all of you for coming on. We did set all-time records today, and that's 100% attributable to Sarit.
Absolutely.
Thank you again. We are happy to provide the programming that we're doing. It is an absolutely no cost to anyone who joins the Zooms, but we certainly live only off of philanthropy. And so I want to encourage everybody who's enjoying the work that we're doing and the job that Jennifer continues to do for us. Please consider contributing to us. You see what you're looking at 100% of our overhead, and Jennifer with the bare wall behind us, behind her. And thank you. And let's continue on. Obviously, let's continue to stand with Israel. Sarit, best to you. Stay safe. The background that we've seen behind you is scary for the Jewish people everywhere, but we know we're going to win this. Let's just all keep rooting. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And guys, I will send out a thank you note where I will CC Sarit's team on there, so you can be added to each one's respective mailing lists where appropriate. And really, as always, Sarit, we can't thank you enough. And we will be in touch about a new the phase 2 of this Zoom, which unfortunately will be going on for a bit longer. So thank you guys so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.